Welcome back, game developers. Today we are going to be implementing part 2 of the inventory tutorial. In part 1, we created the UI and functionalities for creating the grid of the inventory, interacting with items and adding them to our inventory, as well as allowing stackable items into our inventory. Today we will be making the functionality to interact with each item within our inventory with the selection widget, so that we can heal, inspect, and delete an item from our inventory, and in the next tutorial combine items to make a new item in our inventory. This system that I created today is pretty customizable and will follow off the inspection tutorial, the health tutorial, and of course part 1 of the inventory tutorial that we previously did. This took a little while to initially create, so it would mean a lot if you guys could like, subscribe, and comment down below more tutorials you guys would like to see in the future. Also, if you would like to support me, get all the files you're seeing today and from every other tutorial I've done, as well as see your name along with the other people here, I have a link for my Patreon down below. Alright, with that being said, let's get right into the tutorial. So with the conclusion of part 1 of the inventory tutorial, we actually had a couple of bugs for when we clicked on our individual widgets in our inventory. So for example, if we go into our inventory right now, and if I click on one thing, now if I press tab again, you can see it goes through the items in our inventory like so. And we don't really want that. We want to be able to click and get out of it whenever we want to. So let's go and fix that right now. So the way that we do that is we want to go to our individual slots, and we want to go to our item button. Once you go there, you want to scroll down on the right, and basically the reason why that's happening is because of the focus setting. So we don't want this to be focusable, so the way to change that is go to interaction and set is focusable to be false. So now if we go back in and we test it, we can see that now we can click and do whatever we want, but still be able to press tab and go out of this menu. So now this works exactly like how we want to, and now we can extend with our new implementations. So first things first, let's go to get some textures that we need. So we're going to need a couple different textures. I could show you the ones that I already have downloaded. We're going to need a wrench icon for our combine. We're going to need a delete icon for deleting items, a heal icon for healing items, and a search icon for inspecting the current item that we have. And so these icons I got online, so you could find them online as well. They're not very hard to find. You could just look up the specific one and look up like 2D texture, flat image, PNG, whatever it may be. So yeah, we're going to be using these textures. So I'll go to my textures folder. I'll make a new folder and I'll do it for selection textures. And inside of there, we will import those textures. So just dragging them, bring them in like so. And one thing to make sure to do, because you can see right now they don't look right, we can go over all of them. First off, save, and we can right click, asset actions, edit selection via in property matrix, go down over here, and we want to change the compression setting to be UI, so user interface, and we want to change the texture group to be UI as well. Now we can save all of this and close them. You can see now they are displaying correctly. You can also do that individually if you just change it right here, but I decided to do them all at once just to show you an easier way to do it. Great, so the next thing we're going to want to do is actually create our selection widget. So let's go to our inventory folder. We can right click, go to user interface, and go down to widget blueprint. We'll select the common user widget and call it W_selection. And basically this is going to hold all of our different icons and our different buttons for selecting certain actions we want to do with a specific item. So first things first, let's bring in a canvas panel. Let's drop it down like so. And off of this, we're going to want to change some of the settings. So instead of fill screen up here, first off, let me make this bigger. Instead of fill screen up here, we're going to want to do a desired on screen. So let's bring it down to desired on screen. And you can see right now it's small, but it's okay. We'll fix that in a second. We're going to want to make sure we have a size box inside of this. So let's grab a size box, bring it in like so. And now here we can size it up to however we want to. So for our specific sizing, we're going to want to make it 0, 0 for the position X and Y. And for the size, we can make it something small like 60. And the Y, we're going to do 325. So that's the size X and size Y. You can see it's vertical just like it is in Resident Evil because that's how we're sticking to it. We can make the Z order just anything larger than 0. It doesn't really matter. I'll just make it 10 just in case you have multiple elements that you have in yours. You want this to be on top. So you want this to be what they see after they click on a specific slot icon. So we're going to make it like so. Let's make sure we override all of these. So we're going to want to override all of this. And basically we're just going to set it to exactly what it is now. So let's just make sure we set it to 60, 600 or 300 override, sorry. And then let's do 60, 300 override, and 60 and 300 for a max desired width and height. Great, so now that we have this, let's make sure we add another element. This time we want an overlay, and the reason for that is because we're going to have multiple elements basically inside of this overlay. So let's click on the overlay, and now we want to add a couple of different elements we're going to have to make it so this really looks like how we want it to. So we're gonna need a couple of images. So for one, let's add an image and let's drag it in, and let's call this background image. So this is going to basically be how it looks all the way up and down behind. So we're going to, let me reference how it actually is supposed to look and all of my settings that I have. So, okay, we're going to want to firstly make sure that this goes throughout the whole image. So there's multiple ways you can do this. I tried to go for the Resident Evil approach, and so I have a faded image that I will leave along with the other images in a Google Drive for you guys to download so you guys can follow along. So yeah, right here I have the inventory selection PNG. So basically this is going to be the background, and the reason that I made it like this, I made it in Photoshop, but basically all it is just faded up here on the top and faded on the bottom to resemble how it is in Resident Evil. So what we can do is we can go back to our first person map right here to go back to our textures. We can go right into this section, or actually the selection textures probably be more fitting because it does have to do with that, and just bring it in just like we did before. All we need to do is go into it, change it to be UI, and compression settings to user interface 2D. We can save that, close that, and now go back to our widget underscore selection and change the image to be the one that we just had. So if we have it selected right now, we can go into it and just press this little arrow, and you can see now it's just faded at the top and faded at the bottom. Now to make it look like the one that I have that you've seen in the beginning of the video, the settings that we're going to want is we're going to want to change the tint just a little bit, so we can make it 0.95 all across the board. So we could do it like this, like this, like this, and then change the opacity to be 0.8, just so it's a little bit darker and it doesn't have such a bright effect. Perfect. So the next thing we're going to want to do is add some of the other icons we need. So we can actually, we can actually bring back more images. We're going to need 2 other images, so we can edit this one and then just duplicate it. So we'll want this to be the top arrow, and we're going to want to basically style this to be just like how it is in Resident Evil. So I should have in here the interact icon. This is the one that we're going to use, and we can just style it to make it look a little bit different. So what we'll do is we'll make it so it's centered just like so, and I'm going to add some padding so that it's 10 from the top just like this. And I basically just need to rotate this now. So all we need to do is go down to translation, change the angle to be 180, just like so. And now you can see that it is flipped upside down. On top of this, we can go up a little bit to color and opacity and change the opacity to be 0.7. So it's a little bit faded with the upper top of this image. And we're basically going to want to do the exact same thing, but for the other one. So basically all we have to do is just duplicate this image. We can call this now bottom arrow. And now we're going to want to keep all of this the same, but we're going to want to make it so it's all the way at the bottom. So let me check and see what the padding is for this one. We're going to want to make it 275. So from the top, it'll be 275, just like so. And we can reset the angle right here back to 0 so it faces the correct way. So now you can see this is kind of how it's going to look, and all of the buttons are going to be in line down the center. All right, so now let's make sure that we get some buttons. So we're going to want 4 total buttons. So let's bring in our buttons just like so. We're going to want this button, and we can style it first. Style one first and then just duplicate it so we can make it easier for ourselves. So let's call this button underscore heal. So that could be our first button. Let's make sure we have the same type of styling that we want. So we're going to want to make it in the center. We're going to want to make it now from the top 50, because each of them are a certain size. So we want it to be a certain size as well. We're going to want to make the size X and Y image size right here, and change this X to be 48 and the size to be 48 as well. So it's a little bit bigger, just so it looks better for us. We're going to want the tint to be 000, so it's blacked out because we want them all to look the same. And we're basically going to want to change the image to be the healing icon that we originally had. So we can go back, go to our healing icon right here, go into our image right here and just select it like so. And now you can see our healing image is already in here like we want it to be. After this, we're going to want to make sure we expand our outline settings and basically change these settings to align with being a circle. So if you don't know, in Unreal Engine, you can make it so the rounded box looks more like a circle. So we can do that by changing the corner radius. So we can change it to 23 by 23 by 23 by 20. 3, and you can see now it looks more like a complete circle. So changing this outline color can really show you that. So this is like a blacker color, and changing the width can really show you here how that would look. So I feel like that's pretty nice. We're basically going to want to replicate this, but also make it for the hovered and the pressed. We're going to want to change the color for those. So what we can do is we can copy this normal styling right there by right clicking and pressing copy, and now going down to right here to hovered, you can paste it, but we're going to want to change the tint because now we want it to show that we're actually hovering over it. So the way to do that is we're going to want to go down to the outline settings and basically change the outline settings for these. So it should be the same. We can even make it a little bit bigger if you want to, making it like 25, like so, and then change the outline setting to be something a little bit better. So we're going to want to change the color. So let's change the outline of the R to be 1. You can make this 0.98, and 0.98 is, or part 68, sorry, to make it a little bit of a cooler yellowish tone, and make the opacity something like 0.885. And now you can see this is kind of something we want. And let's make the width a little bit bigger as well, so that now it'll be more exacerbated, so when we actually hover over it you can really tell. Now same thing, we're going to want to copy the hovered settings and go down to the pressed, paste it, and then we're going to want to change it up a little bit again. So go to the outline and let's make it so now it is, let me go to outline color, it'll be 0.98, then let's make it 0.47. So it's a little bit more yellowish toned. It's really like this is you selecting it. And now let's change it to be a little bit bigger. So let's make it 3.5. And now this will really just make it so you can really see the image through all the states when it's regular, just styled, and then when it's hovered and pressed. So great. So now that we have this, we can make it easy on ourselves and duplicate this button multiple times. So let's create a new button and let's call it button underscore combine. And this button in particular, we're going to be utilizing in our next tutorial when we actually go over combining, because that'll be a little bit of a longer tutorial. So let's create that button. Let's create button underscore inspect, which we will be doing soon, and then button underscore delete. And all of these we will be doing today. And also I misspelled inspect with 2 P's. All right, so now that we have all these, let's make sure that the padding offset on the top is correct and goes the way that we want it to. So for combine, we want it to be 105. So off the top, it'll be 105. I think they all change by 65. So we can do it like this, and we'll change up the icon in a moment. Let's do the next one as 160. So it's actually 55 between each. And then this one, since that's 160, I want this one to be 215. So now you can see that's exactly how it should look. So now all we really want to do is change the icons for each of these different states, because the styling will be essentially the same. So for the combined one, we'll grab the wrench, we'll go over here, and through all of these states, we just want to change it to be the wrench. Same thing for the inspect. We want to go to the inspect button, go through all the states, and make sure that they're all changed to be the inspection symbol. And then lastly, for the delete, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go through all of them and make sure that it's all delete. Great. So now that that's done, this is essentially exactly what we want with our selection widget. So we can save all this, make sure it's all saved, and close. All right, so now with the selection widget that we just created, we want to change our item slot widget that we created in the last tutorial. So let's open that up. And essentially the logic is when we click on this button, that means we want to interact with the specific item in our inventory. So we're going to want to appear the selection widget we just made for that specific item and all those actions pertaining to that specific item. So what we can do is we can go into this widget and actually get another widget. We can get our selection widget. So let's W underscore selection, and you can see the widget that we just made. What we can do is we can drag that and make that right. Let's close that and then do it right here. So you can see now it's exactly where we want, but we want to change the location to be more over here. So the way that we could do that is we can go over here and change the translation to be 100 to make it to the right more, and negative 100 to make it go up more. And now it's centered exactly like how we want with the specific item icon right here. Additionally, we're going to want to make sure that we change the visibility to be hidden by default, because originally they're not going to click on it. So by default, when they open up the inventory, we don't want it to show up. So we want it to be hidden by default. And let's also make sure to change the input priority to 1. And to make sure that this is focusable, because we do want to be able to click on these certain buttons. And after you've done those things, we can actually save this and we can go into our graph, because now we're going to have to create a couple of functionalities to use that selection widget that we just made. Let's start going into what we need to happen every single time we click on an item, because we want the selection widget to show. And thankfully for us, that's pretty easy. All we have to do is go to our designer. We can go to the button, go all the way down, and go to the events. We basically want on clicked, so that'll bring it up for us right here. Just bring it over here like so, and we're essentially going to want to change the visibility of the selection widget that we just made. So all we have to do is we just want to originally see if our specific item is actually valid. So what we can do is we can get an is valid node, and the one you're looking for is the one with the question mark right here. So we're going to grab that, and we can straighten it out with Q, bring it up a little bit. All we want to do is we want to get the specific item that we have right here, and we want to break this. And we essentially want to see if this value is actually valid. And the way to do that is by going off of the item image, putting it into the input object, just like so. And if it is valid, then all we want to do is just change the widget selection to be true, or to be actually showing. So all we want to do is go off of this and set the visibility of the widget to be visible from hidden. Now, just like so, that's all we need to do. And you can compile and save. And now what you can see is once we go into the widget, if you click on something, nothing will happen. We can still close our widget, but if we interact with the specific item, we can now click on it and see everything we just made, which is perfect. And let me make it a little bit bigger so you guys can really see what it looks like. You can see now when we click on it, we can actually see all these things. But now we need to actually make the functionality for clicking on these buttons and for them to actually do something. So let's get into that now. All right, so now that's done, that'll work. We can just comment this out really quick, and on item clicked, you know what we want to do. We just want to show the selection widget. So now that we have all of this done, we actually want to start with making those buttons in the selection widget actually do something. So there's multiple ways to do this. You can go into the selection widget and make it so this interacts with the w_item slot like independently, and that they both go back and forth, and you can do it that way if you want to. But the way that's a little bit easier for us is to go off of the event construct. Let's grab the event construct, and let's basically just set up our events here so that every single time we don't have to go between the widgets and make it so they cast to one another every single time and all of that. So let's just make it easier for ourselves and set it all up here. So let's originally cast to the BP_first person character, because there's the inventory in there, and there's some other things that we need from there in order for us to do this correctly. So let's cast to the character, and let's get the player character just like so. Bring this out, and from this we're just going to want to, of course, promote this to a variable so we can use it. So we could just call this player or first person reference. And we can actually organize our variables a little bit so that it's a little bit more easy for us to really see. So let's basically organize them into a couple of different sections. So originally we can see right here, we have 2 that pertain to the item that we're actually interacting with. So we can just go over here to category, all this item. We can put that into the item category, and let's put this also into the item category, just like so. So now they're both in the item category. And we also are going to want, for one, this index variable actually we never really use. Like if you go to it and you find references, there's no references to it. So what we can do is we can delete this variable. Sorry, it glitches like this sometimes. We can delete this variable, but what you will see is it's going to cause an error when we actually spawn our widget. So when we, let me see. Oh, sorry, not here. In our widget grid, if you go to the graph, if you go to refresh widget, right here you can see that this index was used right here, but actually after doing some testing we actually don't need this value. So we can just press Alt and left click, and that button will, or that node will no longer be connected like that. And that's actually fine. We don't actually use that value ever, so we don't need to have a variable for that. After this, let's make sure that we go into this and change the category to be character. So we have a character category as well. And inside of there, let's just do it now. We're going to need a variable for health as well. We're going to need a healing sound. So the healing sound, if you don't want one, but in our character, we have a healing sound. So I'll pull that up right now. Sorry, it's not even there. It's actually in our BP_base health item. We have a sound that we play every single time for our healing sound. So if you don't want a healing sound, then you don't need to add this variable. But if you do, I recommend adding it. So we're just going to be going into our characters, and let's essentially just create a new variable. It's going to be of type sound base, I believe. Let's do sound base. Yep, just like so. Object reference. And let's just basically make it healing sound. And so the sound is essentially going to be played every single time. So you can bring it into the character, and we can go press the right arrow on our keyboard, and then just do health for the health category in particular. So now you can see we have multiple categories. And you can see sometimes it does this. All you really need to do is just bring it over here. So now it's just one, and so now it's all into the categories that we need. So it's a little bit more organized for us. Great. So now off of this, we're basically going to want to initialize all the different events that we want to have. So let's make a sequence node because there's 4 buttons. We're going to want 4 different entries from our sequence node. So off of our first entry, let's go up here and let's create a reroute node. And we're essentially going to want to bind the event from the on click of the specific button that we want to a custom event in this blueprint. So if that sounds a little confusing, it probably is originally, but it'll make a little bit more sense in a second. It's pretty easy to understand. All we need to do is grab the widget for the selection widget that we have, and we want to go off of this and get the heal button. So we just get button_heal, go off of this, and we essentially just want to bind event to on clicked. So when it's actually clicked, this event right here is going to be called instead of anything in the selection widget. So we can make a custom event, and we can just call it from right here instead, and it's a whole lot easier for us. So let's just call this heal event. And off of this, we can do the logic here, or we can just connect the function. Let's just actually make a function so it's a little bit easier for us and more organized. Let's call this heal player. And inside of here, we're going to want to set up our functionality for healing the player. And luckily for us, we actually have that functionality already if you follow the healing tutorial. So we can go to our health item, and we can actually get all of that right here. So all we have to do is just go over this. Oopsies. Just go over this and copy this, and we can go back to our item slot right here and paste it. The first thing we want to check, however, is if our item is actually a healable item. Because if it's not, then we don't want anything to happen when we click on this button. So let's grab our item up here, drag it in, and we want to break this in order to get all the attributes from our item. Let's bring this up, and we want to see if it's a healable item, and if it is, then now we want to proceed. We don't want to do anything off of this, because if they click this and it's not a healable item, we don't want to do anything. So what we can do is we can even show it up here, just in case you guys get confused during the tutorial. We can put it up here and just say like, this is not a healable item. Now off of the true, we want to connect it to this branch actually. So let's move all this down and make it a little bit more straight. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to get the player health from the character. So thankfully for us, we made the character reference right here. Let's bring that in, and now we have the first person reference for the player health. And additionally, we're going to want to connect it right here, and I'm pretty sure right here as well. So you can see this health increase right here. Instead of creating a new variable, we can just do the healing amount from the specific item that we are interacting with. So this is actually how much will be healed. So we can, oopsies, we can bring this in, put this right here, and reroute it. Because basically the item that we're interacting with will hold the data for how much we want to heal by, if that makes sense. So as long as we're between 0 and 100 health, we want to heal by that amount. And this clamp is used, if you're confused, this clamp is used because if our player health is 90, for example, but the healable item heals us 20, it won't go to 110, it'll just make sure it stays at 100 maxed. So great. Now that we have this is the main functionalities, and of course this is what we made last time. And yeah, so now since we have all of that set up, all of this is already taken care of. The healing sound in particular is from the variable that we created right here. Additionally, we want to go to our healing sound and make sure that our default sound is from the healing one that we have here. So we can go to our healing sound here, go grab this sound, make sure we use that here as well. Hey guys, post edit code things here. I accidentally put a remove from parent right here at the end of our heal player. And if we do that, I can show you guys what it will actually do. It's going to cause a problem with our inventory where our last slot of our inventory will actually get deleted. So if I press the H key and hurt myself a little bit, and then go into our inventory and heal, you can see that the last icon right here actually gets erased from our inventory, which is not what we want. So for now, you guys can leave this blank and have nothing, and we'll come back to it because we're actually going to be using the delete item functionality once we get to that to actually call here, so that when we use it, it actually works the way it's supposed to. So we could test this. Let's go to this one in particular. Let's make sure this is this a healable one? Yes, it is. So we can press play, go into here, and if we hurt ourselves, I think it's the H key. Yeah, you can see just like that. Now, if I click on a healable item, this should heal us by 10. So originally we're just going to interact with it. If we go into our inventory and press the heal button, it does nothing, but let's figure out why that is. The reason why is because we actually never hooked it up to our custom event right here. So let's make sure we definitely do that. Drag that in, hook that up to heal player. So now if we go in and test it out, and if we hurt ourselves a little bit and then go into here, click on the heal icon, you can see now it erases from our inventory because we used the healable item and it healed us a little bit, which was 10 health in this particular case. And it also played the sound for us, which is perfect. That's exactly what we want. So now let's go on to the next things that we need to add. So for our case, the healing is now taken care of, but we're going to want to, we can close this. We can also close this. And I'm pretty sure we can close this as well. So now the healing is taken care of. So we can just comment on this and essentially just call it setting event for healing player. Perfect. So now we want to do the same exact thing for the second button, which is combining items. Now we can set it up right now if you want to. So let's just drag this and bring it back down here. And we can go off of button combine. But like I said previously, this would be a little bit of a longer thing. And let's make this video way too long. So what we'll do is right now, we'll just set it up, bind event to on clicked. But we're going to have to set this up in the next tutorial because this would just make this tutorial way too long. So let's grab this and let's call it just like what we did previously. Let's call it combine event. I'll bring it down a bit. And essentially we can just make a print string just so that we know it's actually working. And we can just call this should combine items. And essentially the way that'll work is you'll have to click on multiple items and then together they'll have to create something. Great, so now after this, we're going to want to use our inspect and also our delete. So in order to do that, we want to do the same exact thing. We want to go off of right here and we basically want to make sure we bind event to on clicked again. So let's drag in our W selection and let's get button for inspection in particular. And now let's bind event to on clicked. We want to make sure that goes off of this then too and reroute it so it's a little bit neater and bring this down a little bit. Now off of this custom event, we're going to want to call this inspect event. And now with this one, we're going to have to change up our system a little bit from our previous tutorial to make it so it caters a little bit because we're basically going to be adding a widget on top of a widget and trying to get rid of one widget at a time. It's a little bit much, so we're going to want to make sure we set it up the right way. So again, let's go up to our functions and let's create a new function. Let's call it inspect item. Now, before we get started with this actual function, we can compile and save, but let's go to our first person. Let's go to our inventory and our structure. And let's actually add a couple of new things. So for our structure, let's add a new variable. And let's make it a rotator as the variable type. So let's go rotator, just like so. And let's call it item inspection rotation. And we can keep it just right here. And then let's make another variable and let's call it item inspection scale. And this will make it a little bit easier for us because it'll keep all of our data. Oh, this will be a vector. It'll make it a little bit easier for us to keep all of our data in one space. So the item inspection scale is a vector and the item inspect rotation is a rotator. After this, we can close this And let's go back to, we can save all of this, and it's going to need a lot of saving because it changes all of our instances where we have an item. And we're going to now want to go to our blueprints. And the one thing we're going to want to change is our interface. So our interact interface, we're going to want to add actually a new interaction. So instead of just inspect right here, we're going to want to utilize a new one as well. So let's go a new function, and let's call this interact. And we can even do interact UI because this is the interact specifically for the UI. So we're going to want to add all the same variables that we have from this one, except we're going to want to add just one more. So let's go and make sure we add the character from the BP first person character data type. So let's do add a variable, an input in particular, and let's call it character. And this is going to be from the BP underscore first person character object reference. Same thing, we're going to want to add an inspected item, which is a static mesh. So let's do inspected item, and this will be a static mesh. Oh, I guess I have to type it all the way. Static mesh right here, not the actor, we want the static mesh object reference. And then after this, what else do we need? We need the item name and item description, and both of those are text. So we can just add one and make it a text. And what is this? Item name, and then item description. So make sure you have both of those. And now the last one, we're going to make it the inventory reference, and this is going to be from W underscore inventory grid right here. Just make the object reference. Great. So now let's compile and save this. And if you're confused why we're actually creating a new function for this, I'll show you in a second, but we're just going to want to change a couple of things with our actual inspection system right now. So what we want to do is we want to navigate to our inspection right here. We want to go to our BP underscore inspect item. So now the way that we inspect items right now is specifically tailored to if we're interacting with the item and it has the inspection enabled right here. So that's the way that it's tailored right now, but we don't want it to really always be here. We want it to also be able to inspect it from our UI. So the way to change that is we're going to create a new event right here specifically for our inspect UI. So let's move this up a little bit and make room for our inspect UI. So we can do it right here. We can look specifically for our event interact UI. And you can see right here, this is the right one. You'll know if you have this little BPI symbol up here, which is perfect. This is exactly what we want. So, okay, the first thing we're going to want to do is go to the bottom left for your variables and let's create two Boolean variables. The first one's going to be is inspect UI, and the second one is going to be is inspect, so that we can see if we're using the inspect UI or if we're using the inspect. So if we're using the inspect UI, we're going to want to set is inspect to be false originally, and same in the opposite way for event inspect. We're going to set is inspect UI to be false originally, just like so. So make sure you don't get that confused. We want it to be basically flip-flop. So inspect, the event inspect will have inspect UI set to be false Boolean originally, and the event interact UI is going to have is inspect false originally. Now after this, for us, we're basically just going to want to promote this to a variable. We want the inventory reference to be a variable for us to reference, and then thankfully for us, everything else is exactly the same. So we can just copy all of this and paste it right here, and just essentially put it in the values just like how they are. So we can bring in the character right there, bring in the item name, item description, just like how they are, and make sure that the inspected item goes into the set static mesh right here. So all of this will be exactly the same, but afterward, we're going to want to set the variables to be true if we are interacting with one or the other. So since right here, we have the interact UI, we'll go all the way to the end and set is interact UI to be true. And the same but opposite here is inspect, sorry, not interact UI, inspect UI, as is inspect right here will be set to true for the is inspect event. So okay, hopefully that wasn't too confusing. I might have did a couple tongue twisters and messed up my wording right there, but hopefully that makes sense with what I'm trying to say. Now after this, You might still be like, I don't understand why we needed to have 2 different events, but I will show you right now. So essentially, let's bring all of our logic for our actual rotation and scaling and everything of our events down a little bit. And let's essentially, oopsies. Let's essentially just change up our logic when we're pressing our interact key, because essentially that's how we leave our widget. You can see right here in our inspection widget, if we open it up, press E to exit is our interact button. So that's actually how we're leaving and interacting with it as well. So off of started, we're going to want to have a little bit of a different functionality. So what we can do is we can drag all this down a little bit. So all this logic, we can bring down just a bit. And the first thing we want to do is we want to see basically if we're inspecting with an item just on the ground, like if it's just right here and we're inspecting with it, or if it's in our UI. So the way that we do that is we use the isInspect boolean that we created, and that's why we created it above. So if isInspect is true, then we just want to do everything we did up here, just how we did it before. But if it's false, we want to do basically the same thing we did up here, but change it up a little bit at the end. So what we can do is we can copy all of this, just like so, and paste it. But we're going to want to get rid of a few things because we won't need them if we're only inspecting with our UI. So we're still going to want to disable and enable input, and then inspect widget reference. We're gonna have to see if it's valid still, and then remove from the parent. We're still going to set the inspection widget. We're then going to destroy the actor, but after this, we can just get rid of this for now because we know that we're only doing the inspection. We're not doing note references right now, unless we do that later, but for now, let's just make it so it's not there. And now is where we want to make it so our UI interacts and behaves correctly. So some of you may get errors with this, or not really errors, but it won't behave the way it wanted to. The way you guys wanted to, excuse me. So the way that we make this is we want to now get the inventory reference variable we have, and we want to set input mode UI only. So the reason for this is because if we're going out and we're leaving, remember we leave also by pressing I_interact. If we're leaving, we want the inventory grid to be right here, sorry. The inventory grid right here, we want this to be in UI mode because we're selecting items and we're not in the game right now. We're only in the UI section. So we want this to be in UI only. So let's also get the player controller. Make sure we adjust these like so. So now we have both of these, and just like that, now we have that set up correctly. Now, to make this a little bit easier for us, we should also go back to our actual items. So we can go to our base item, and we can kind of change how this logic works now, because we're not really going to be using those variables anymore if we have it in our structure anyways. So for us, we have in our inventory this item right here, and that's the data that we already set on a per item basis. So you can see right here, we have all of this data right here. Now this data right here for item inspection, rotation, and scale is now going to be in our structure once this updates. So instead of having it here and setting it here by default, let's actually go back and set it directly from our item. So we can go off of here and break. And now we can just grab this item inspection rotation, put it right in here and delete this variable, and item inspection scale and put it right in here and delete this variable. And that makes it a little bit easier for us to handle all of our data in one section instead of having multiple different areas where we have to remember if we set data somewhere or didn't set it another place and everything like that. So now it's all handled in one section. Additionally, before I forget, it's probably a good idea if we go back to our blueprints and we go back to our inventory, go to our structure, and make sure that we set some default values. So by default, I'm assuming if you're going with an item, you want it to be true, that it's an inventory item. And let's assume that the scale is 1 by default if you're interacting with it. And to really solidify that, we want to make sure that it also is interactable. And oh my god, I am so sorry, I completely forgot. We also need one more variable that's actually very important. We need another boolean, and this one's going to be item inspectable, and this is basically going to determine if we can inspect this item or not. So this basically makes it so it's a little bit easier for us when we actually set up our logic here. So I think this is good now, and of course you want to set the item to be inspectable by default as well as a default value. So now we can close these, and let's start handling everything we don't need anymore. So we can go to our interaction inspection and we can get rid of these two now, because now you can see if we find references, there's no references to them anymore. So we can delete that, and now it's a little bit easier for us. So now if we want to just inspect an item, instead of like picking it up, we can just select this inspect and it'll stop right here and just inspect it instead of adding it to inventory. So this all works the way that we want it to now. And this works as well. All of this works the way that it's supposed to. So now if we go to our actual inspect item, we can actually start doing the logic that we need. So good for us. We can go right here and kind of copy this logic because it's essentially the exact same. We don't want this, but we can copy all of this. And it's right here. And then we want to go into our w_item slot and basically paste it. So this will essentially be the same, but just like before, we have to do a couple of checks before we actually just do this. Let's bring it over. The first thing we want to check is if this item is inspectable, and that's why we added that in our struct. So if we break it, just like so, if we look if it's inspectable is the first thing we want to see. If it is, then we want to continue with our logic. So we want to basically keep going with our inspect logic that we already created. We want to create this and make sure all of this is set up the way that it's supposed to be. So the scale should go right here as well. We can even delete this and just make it so it just goes like this. And now the character should go from the get player character. So thankfully we have that reference right here, just like so. Now after this, you might remember we made a new event right here. So we're not going to want to use the inspect event. We're actually going to want to call the inspect UI event, and you might not see it here. The way that we really can see it is if we go off of the first person reference, we type in inspect, and I realized we actually made a little bit, that's probably why that was such a tongue twister. We should probably go back to our interact interface, and you guys might have picked up on it. I call this interact UI when it's supposed to be inspect UI. So we can call it like that, and that's the reason why it wasn't showing up before. So let's make sure we go off of this now, and now we will see it. Inspect UI is the one that we want. So we can go off of this, grab it just like so. And essentially the target will not be here, the character will be here. The target is going to be this variable right here. The inspected item again will be the mesh. The item name will go straight up to item name, and item description the same. And we're going to want to make sure that we get the inventory reference from right here in our variable section from last time. So now we have all of that, but we're not done just yet. We're then going to want to make sure that we set the input mode to game and UI, because we need to control where we are looking in the actual inventory right here, or in the actual inspection, I'm sorry. So the way that we do this, we're going to want to get player controller, and we're going to want to get the widget to focus, which in this case is going to be the inspect widget. So we can get that by going from the object and get inspect widget reference, sorry, not set. We want to get inspect widget reference right here, and we can drag that, so we can add a little reroute and drag that over, and this is essentially going to be the value that we will be inserting as the focusable widget right here, just like so. And everything else will now stay the same. So if we compile and save, put into the event graph the inspect item function we just made. Now if we go in and let's test out this logic. So firstly, the best way to test it out is by creating an item here that specifically is inspect. And then if we have another one right here, we can test it out this way. So let's see. So for this item in particular, it should inspect, and you can see the scale is really small. And the reason for that is because this one probably had a bigger scale. I think it had 10 by 10. So what we could do is we can go here, and now instead of looking all down here, we could just go right here, just change it 10 by 10 by 10. And let's check it out, play from here. Now let's see, if I go and interact, now you can see it's a lot bigger, it's a lot better right here. And this is originally just inspecting. And if I go into it, it does go into our inventory, but we can also inspect it there by pressing on this button. And you can see that there is a little bit of a blur effect in the background right here, but we still are very much able to inspect our item that we're interacting with. It is in our inventory, and then when I press E, it'll get rid of it. But you can see now we can still do things with our inventory, which is great. If I press tab, we can go out and we can do the same exact thing. So now if we want to, it doesn't really matter. But one problem is, you can see right here, when we unhover, our selection widget does not go away. So we do need to fix that in a second. So let's actually go back and let's fix that right now. We can go right to our widget slot over here. Sorry, not the designer. Let's get out of this specific function, and we can also drag this up because now we're going to need to add the last functionality after that. But on unhovered, we're going to want to change the, where is it? The widget selection. We're going to want to change it to now be not visible. So set visibility, and we'll change it to hidden right here, and that should fix that issue that we just seen. So let's see. Now if I go over something and I collect something first, if I go over here and go off of that, now you can see that works the way that it's intended. So it's supposed to go like this, and then if you go off of it, it goes away. So this works exactly the way we want it to, which is great, and we can still interact and inspect our item, and everything works exactly like how we want to. Now there's one button left, and that is the delete button. So if we want to get rid of something in our inventory, how do we do that? So the way that we will do that is, let's go back to our item slot right up here. We'll start the exact same way we always do, and we'll go off of our W selection, and we will get the button delete. We'll grab that, make sure they're just like so, and we're going to bind event to onClicked, just as we did before. Bring that up here, and let's reroute it. Bring it down just like so. Add a custom event, which we both know by now. Let's call it delete event, and yeah, we're just going to want to now create a function just like we did before, and we'll call it delete item. So all we're going to want to do is, we're basically just going to want to first get the first person character. So let's get the first person reference, and off of this we're going to want to get the inventory component. And the reason for this is because we want to see, let's scroll down. Can I just get the inventory component? There we go. We're going to want to basically grab the items from the inventory in particular, and we're going to want to manipulate them. So if we're going to delete one, we have to find that index where it is, and we have to remove that index in our array. So we can set it up just like so. So let's bring this down a little bit just so it's not the entire page, and let's bring it up just like this. Bring this up. So now what we want to do is, we want to firstly find item. And so the item that we're going to be finding is the particular item that we're interacting with in our inventory. So let's keep it like this, and we're going to want to go off items again, and this time just remove index. So basically what this will do is, it'll find the index of the array that we're in, and it's going to remove that specific index from the items array, which is basically just our inventory. This is basically our inventory. Now if we do this, and if we refresh our inventory, so originally if we do this, nothing will actually show up in our inventory, but if we do this and refresh our inventory, we're going to have one slot missing now because we removed our index. So essentially it's going to be, all of these are going to be filled, and then when we remove something, this icon is now going to have nothing, but not like no item, but literally no icon showing at all. It's going to be messed up. So what we want to do is, we want to now add or resize our inventory to now fit that item that was just deleted. So the way that we do that is, we want to go off of our blueprint component, our inventory component, and we want to get the inventory size. So let's get the inventory size, and we can bring it up here just like this, and we just want to resize. And essentially this is what we did when we first started, but we want to do it again now. So we can bring it up like so, and this is going to go straight into items just like this, and essentially now it's going to resize it to fit for our new array after it's been removed from the index. And lastly, all we're going to want to do is grab our inventory reference and just refresh inventory to now show these changes we've made. So thankfully this one's a little bit easier, and this will be the exact same. We can just go off of this and just grab this one in particular. So now if we go in and test this out, we can see if this works as well. Let's make sure that we hooked it up to the event graph. No, we didn't. So let's do that also. Bring in the delete item. So now going back to our healing functionality, instead of having a remove from parent right here, we're actually going to want to call the function that we just made, the delete item. And what that will do is it will make it so now once we go in and try to pick up our item, if we hurt ourselves a little bit first, pick up this item and now take this item, you can see now it heals us, as well as doesn't remove this last slot, which would happen if we removed it from the widget, and it also removes it from our inventory completely, which is exactly what we wanted to do. And let's test it out. So if we go in, go over to our item in particular, let's select a few items, bring in a couple, and if we delete this one, so let's say we want to get rid of this one, press the delete, and you can see now it is gone, which is perfect. Now you can see all of our items are gone. We can select more if we want to. We can inspect them and we can heal from them. This one isn't a healable item, but you can see it'll detect it, so it's not a healable item. And in the next tutorial, we're going to make combinable items to maybe make herbs and stuff like that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and let me know more tutorials you guys would like to see in the future. If you want all these files, including all of the other tutorials I've done, and you don't want to waste all your time following all the tutorials in the playlist, you can subscribe to my Patreon and get all of them over there. That comes with the door, it comes with the obstruction wall, that comes with all the movement, the crouching, the watch, like you can see here, and everything that you're seeing, including the inventory. All of it is all over there. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye guys.